Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's April 1st, 2020. I'm struggling trying to create this video today. And this video, I'm going to try to address some of the comments and questions that I've gotten recently. And I'm just having challenges. So hopefully I can make it through this time. So I guess today I posted my video on elderberry rooted cuttings, and yesterday I posted the raised bed versus in-ground types of beds that we produce, that we create. And Lisa Lee commented on both of these videos, and one of the things she mentioned, she's blessed that she doesn't live in a home that has a homeowners association, and that she utilizes a whole variety of different means of growing plants, always trying to increase her resiliency, her sustainability by seeking new opportunities for growing various plants. She mentions buckets, sandboxes, wheelbarrows, hanging planters, and increasing her vertical growing systems as well. So there's awesome looking vertical growing systems that can look like art. I don't know that a homeowners association, a strict one, would enjoy seeing it, but I've seen some that look like pyramids, that have that you could put chard on, beautiful red colors, and then have maybe like various herbs on another layer, and then growing onions, so you have different shapes and forms and colors. If you have that artistic ability and can picture something that would meet the decor of the homeowners association with the colors and all, with the materials that you're using. In other words, you wouldn't want to use an all-white pyramid to grow all of these materials on if they only want beige color systems. So it's you realizing what your community would appreciate and trying to incorporate nutritious foods that you would like. And one of the things I'd always say is so many of if shrubs and bushes and topiaries are appropriate for your homeowners association or your neighborhood, your council, whoever's putting pressures on you, I'd look at that and say, okay, what looks a little bit like that plant that offers, like blueberry plants, their fall colors are so beautiful. Now they're more of a challenge, they require more acidic soil, but that might be one of those landscaping features that you could put in your yard, or herbs as well. And one of the things we did in our place, we use these wire baskets that go on the face of the buildings or face of the pillars, and they're really awesome. They take more time. That's why we don't use them anymore, because the really small growing areas, they might be 16 inches wide by 4 inches deep depth going away from the wall, and maybe 4 or 6 inches deep. They offer good drainage. They're really good. They're very attractive, and they're decorative wire things that mount on the building. But it means more time, and we get more food production in our big garden systems than those small spots that I'd have to go around and hand water as well. Now Lisa Lee had mentioned using buckets, and I'll put a description in the bottom below, and you can always search for it. I think his name is Larry Hall, and he's pretty well known for making popular rain gutter garden systems. Now, one of the systems that we use in our gardens here is a large. We don't use 5-gallon buckets. They're mortar mixing or sandbox mixing systems that are 3 feet long by 2 feet wide bins, and we have it raised up for a handicap access, and we grow food in those systems, and it's fed by a rain gutter that's underneath them. Now, if you live in a place where it's cold like this and the water freezes during the winter time, you have to drain the water out of those rain gutter gardens, otherwise it'll freeze and could burst the system. So rain gutter gardens could be just taking a rain gutter, picking up at your box store, 10-foot length of it with 2 caps on each end, a little float valve, or you just fill it with a hose every once in a while, and you put 5-gallon buckets filled with your favorite soil, with a hole drilled in the bottom of it that has a little wicking pot, that's porous little pot, that you pack peat moss or soil into that, or you could use a rag through it, that allows water to get wicked up from the rain gutter into the 5-gallon bucket. Now, if you're starting seedlings in these buckets, it isn't going to wick all the way up to the seedling. But if you're doing transplants, it may wick enough. But you may have to water them from the top initially. But you could have a 8 or 10 foot row of multiple 5-gallon buckets and have diversity to start out with some tomatoes and peppers, and learn those things. Now, that isn't the system that I find that's a natural system, although you may buy organic compost and soil for those buckets. They're systems where the microorganism communities aren't considered number one in the system. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. Lisa Lee also mentioned that she lives in a desert. I live in a high desert with serious winds, heat, and winter cold too. And that and this was in response to the elderberry rooted cuttings that we've done here. She's gotten new cuttings and trying again. She's had some not much success growing her elderberry hardwood cuttings. Elderberry plants, for the most part, I think like a lot of moisture. From my experiences, the ones that grow here. Now, I have John's and Adam's elderberries and another variety too that I can't remember the name of, and the label blew off or got weathered, so I can't read the label anymore. And neither of them do as well as our native ones that the birds deposited the seed from here. And our property where I got these from is just hard gravel, stony material. You can't dig a spade shovel in more than 1.5 inches into that ground. It's just too darn hard. It's just like a road, a dirt road. And these were growing in that area. I took the cuttings and started those off, and I've been very impressed how well they do. They develop extreme roots in a high moist area. So potentially, when you have sandy ground in a high desert area, if you do have sandy ground, and I'll put a link in the description up in the upper right hand corner to soil composition, whether it's sand, silt, or clay. And another video I'll put there is soil succession, going from a bacterial dominated soil to a fungally dominated soil. The fungally dominated soil, we think of food forests and fruit trees, nut trees, that sort of thing. Bacterial dominated soil, we think of weeds. When we get to about 1/3 of the way up, then we can get to our brassicas and all that. When we get about 2/3 of the way up, we think about our tomato plants and our pepper plants and our egg plants, those sorts of things. So understanding the microbial communities in the various soil systems allows us to optimize the soil for growing whatever plants we want to grow. So if it's a sandy soil, you may have to have some watering system to help support these, or you may want to root these initially in a 5-gallon bucket. You can actually start rooting these in water, these hardwood cuttings. But if you have a 5-gallon bucket or a small bed that you create that's just for getting the roots established on these the first season, and I just do it the first season in a bed and getting those rooted, and then taking the rooted ones, or something like what you'd get from us, the really heavily rooted system, putting that in the soil, amending it with a lot of organic material there, then I think it would do well. Now, with respects to being in an area with high winds, elderberry plants, they're weaklings. They aren't like other limbs on other trees or main stalks on trees. These are wimpy bushes. So the wind really affects them a lot. If there's crossing of the limbs, they're going to damage each other. They're going to rub and bump into each other and create opportunities for diseases to get in, just like if you scratched yourself. So that could impact the plants. I'd say your pruning should be based on your environment and your goals. So with us, I like to have them being pretty much a visual barrier. They will create a wind barrier, and in high wind areas, that means that they're going to get pushed more and there'll be more damage to the limbs. So heavier pruning, or prune until the point where you think it's reasonable. Once the canes get you know, inch and a half, like the bigger, thicker one you saw in the video there, I would prune those the minute they got any bigger than that size. You want to keep thinning them out so that we have the rest of the stems coming up nice and straight, and dealing with them. Now these things can get like 12 foot wide and 12 foot tall, so pruning it to the point that meets your needs, meets whatever your needs are, your goals with the plant, but also taking into consideration the winds, the rainfall, all of those things, so that you have optimal chances for these to get started. So maybe starting them, you know, in your garage or in your basement, wherever it may be, or in a separate garden side, that spot that you have where you can spend some time with the soil there, get them really well established roots, then transplant them into the area that you want them in. So that'd be my suggestion. Let's see, Jeff Dinter, raised in-ground beds. A few years ago we built my wife a raised bed so she could use her power wheelchair. We used old pool legs and built a 4x4 box, lined it with old pool liner, filled it with dirt, placed it on top of the legs so that her wheelchair could get up underneath it and all the way around. Awesome idea, designing it to meet your needs. This worked great. It's finally seen better days, though I had to take it down this year. Actually, I just took it down the other day. Hope to rebuild her another one similar to it in the near future. But this is a way of somebody who is in a wheelchair being able to garden as well, and to think outside the box. Even raised beds on off the ground, it's hard for somebody in a wheelchair to actually, you know, work in the garden. There's so much joy and so much emotional and spiritual moments you can have working in the garden, working in nature. It's just, for me, it's so fulfilling and so enjoyable. And you want to have access to everybody, from small children. So if you've got small children, we want to make sure that they have full access to those garden beds so they can have the experiences. It'd be a learning environment for them. And certainly as we get older, our knees, our joints, there's so many people with so many health issues. The width of the garden bed for people with shoulder injuries or back injuries, and the height, really taking that into consideration when we're designing the system, and taking into account our own age and our own fragility. What we're going to be able to do in a few years based on how our health seems to be heading. I'm a big proponent of really, you know, our ethics are self-care, earth care, people care, and future care. So really taking good care of ourselves. And that's one of the reasons why we really concentrate on the foods that we eat and the soil that makes the food that we eat here as well. So thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate your contributions to the channel. Danielle wrote, with respect to the raised versus in-ground, excellent video, confirms what I was thinking. We live in the Pacific Northwest, southwestern Washington, so rain pretty much 9 months of the year. Not heavy rain, more like a mist in the summer, but dry in the summertime. I have tons of rocks, was thinking of using them to do raised beds. However, suggestions in soil to fill them would be awesome. I really prefer not to purchase, but if we have to, we have to. Seems anytime I bring something home off the property, it's a crapshoot. I'm sorry, I keep touching my nose. My nose is a little bit runny here. We've had soil that just killed everything, which was supposed to be good soil. Any suggestions on soil efficiently, effectively, and economically would be wonderful. Well, you're bringing up several great points, Danielle. I could tell you lots of stories about all our failures. I purchased organic compost from a very reputable organic composting, the biggest one around here in the surrounding counties, and it was terrible stuff. It really didn't grow the food very well. I bought what's called black gold from a mushroom farmer, grows shiitake mushrooms, uses oak sawdust and uses an autoclave system. And that didn't work out very well as well. I've used aged horse manure as well. And so whenever things aren't, whenever when you're not integrating diversity of different organic materials, and when you're not using thermophilic, using appropriate temperatures, appropriate moistures to kill off pathogens and kill off weed seeds, then that's a concern. If you're just piling some of the waste and let it gradually decompose over time, there's weed seeds, there's the rhizomes, there's the roots of the bindweed, the quackgrass in this part of the country. I've experienced all of these things. And even this organic compost producer picked up from grocery stores, picked up from farms, had his own cattle farm as well. And so there's residual pesticides or herbicides that pass through different farm animals. This was really well documented in horses. So some of the broadleaf herbicides that are used in the fields so that they can grow their corn or grow their soil, what ends up happening is those herbicides just pass through intact without being detrimentally affected, and end up being composted and still being viable, and therefore you see your tomatoes don't do too well, your cucumbers don't do, the eggplants and peppers, all these plants don't do very well. I've experienced every single thing that's been there. So I'm really selective about everything that comes on the property. And you'll see that I even make videos showing how to compost weeds, these big, tenacious, big root balls of some of these weeds, with me breaking them down and composting them. Because soil, if nutrition is one, all right, so it's self-care, earth care, people care, and future care are my ethics. Self-care, nutrition, exercise, rest, all of those things are so important, but nutrition is so important. So we grow all the, most of the plants that we eat come here from our site. And that, we're plant-based. We don't eat animal products. So all of these plants, it's really important that it has really valuable nutrients in them, and that they don't just look good, but they have all the viable nutrients. How do you invest in the plants to make them the best? It isn't the seedling that you buy from Walmart or whatever place, or that we grow ourselves here. It's the soil. It's the microorganisms in the soil that mine and do all the work, and as a result, the factory are all the microorganisms, and they meet the needs of the plant to have optimal nutrients. So the most valuable investment you can make is in your soil. And how to get the very best soil? You need diversity of organic materials. So you need to think outside the box. Around here, you could buy hay, you could buy straw. Those are some of your brown materials there, some green material as well. You could gather leaves. In some places you get cocoa fiber. You might have a factory that there's waste products that's organic material. All of your kitchen scraps as well. And we make videos on how I go and I get from Purpose Farm all of these different manures and hay and sawdust bedding that's there. And we grow really beautiful compost here. But it doesn't eliminate the residual herbicides that are left that pass right through the digestive system. And I cannot completely kill those pesticides, those herbicides, with thermophilic. Even we use an extensive, a very valuable way of killing pathogens and weed seeds. It won't kill all those residual herbicides that are in the horse's manure. So we use diversity. So the manure that we get has camels, alpacas, horses, donkeys, goats, pigs, sheep, chickens, turkey, pheasants, peacocks, you name it. There's so much diversity there. And there will be some persistent herbicides in there, but by relative ratio, it's predominantly really good, highly nutritious, because of the integration of all the different materials that are there, that the relative amount of those persistent herbicides is so small. Now the microorganisms do all the work. They're the ones that grab all the important minerals by breaking it down, working with fungi and all, and they're some of the microorganisms, and they extract it from the sand, the silt, and the clay, those structures that are in the material. So by being mindful of how good your soil drains, how much it retains water, and using large volumes, I really believe in lots and lots of organic material. If you were to take a soil sample and bring it to your soil extension lab, they'd probably say 5% organic material, you're good for your garden beds. And I'd say that's about 30% per unit volume, because 5% of dry matter basis is equivalent to about 30% volume of organic material. So when you see our beds, our composting systems are huge, and then it comes down to much smaller amounts. And that's because the microbial communities are expanding and growing as we're feeding the microorganisms, and those microorganisms are getting established in our garden beds, and then we're continually adding materials. So having leaf piles or shredded leaf mulch, or having old hay that got wet, whatever it may be. And initially you may start off using something like hay bales or straw bales and putting compost in the center of them and doing it. People do that sort of system, or doing bucket gardening initially. But as you get more vegetable material, like out of that whole tomato plant, there's some valuable food for the microorganisms after you're done getting the plant materials that you want, the vegetable matter. Same thing with the brassicas, the broccoli stems, the broccoli leaves. All these materials can be reincorporated. So always think about, is this an organic material or an inorganic material? Coffee grounds are great. Kitchen scraps are great. I don't like using animal products too much unless it's been cooked thoroughly, because of the potential pathogens that are in, all chicken products and all. So and that's the reason that they tell you to make sure it's thoroughly cooked at the appropriate temperature, even in the center of the meat. Things have changed a lot over time, and those pathogens can get into your soil as well, and it can get into the food that you eat. It can be taken up into the plants. So being mindful of what you're putting into your soil, and always putting building blocks for them, using mulch systems. And I've gone over these things in other videos. There's no I don't have a really simple way of sharing. I've tried doing this a couple times in the video about how to build the soil for your beds. I'll see if I can say this rather quickly. We've not only gotten the black gold, the mushroom compost, we've gotten aged manures, we've done all these things that I've mentioned. The best thing that's worked is going ahead, and we've used the soil for the dirt part, which is not the ideal microorganisms, but where there's some good rich spots. So if you find the base of a hillside, some of the runoff, the soil that's left that spot, there might be some really nice loamy soil down there. And then by adding lots of organic material to that, hauling that up into your raised bed may be the beneficial thing. But you may not be in that spot initially. You may have to go ahead and purchase some of the things, some cow manure to mix in with the dirt that's there, covering up the base of the lawn with cardboard and paper products initially, and putting leaf mulch down in there. I'd be real careful of anything that I'm getting. Yes, it's organic material, but some people use lawn services, so you may not want their grass clippings. You won't want to use and break down many of the flower systems that you see. There's neonics that are being used in those systems, and they're pretty persistent as well, and other herbicides that they use. Lowe's, Home Depot, I think they're still using those products. So when I'm picking up leaves and all, I'll make sure I don't use any of those materials, because they'll be persistent in the compost that we make ultimately, and will be a problem. Let me see. Becky commented about the grapevines. I had done ways that we've supported and used pergolas and trellises for growing our grapevines. And she has some old grapevines that were fallen over on her property. I believe that was the story. And one of the things I would say is really prune the grapevines back heavily. Pull off anything other than, gone up, and I know she's short. So pick out a height that's real good, that's easy for you to reach at. So it might be 5 foot. Cut it off and cut it off so that you just have 2 short sections that are coming off of it so that they can expand and develop the grapes. You may have to stand these up and do some supports initially to get them, and then building a trellis around them. I know there was concern Becky had about there being too much shading of her vegetable garden if she put in a pergola. I agree, pergolas are beautiful, but they aren't easy to get to prune and do the regular maintenance that you need to do with grapevines, and certainly more challenging to harvest the materials. I've made mistakes, made some really nice pergolas, and it hasn't worked out for my ease of maintenance and ease of harvesting. The trellises work extremely well. John Smith asked about how long does it take to get the roots and the shoots, the sweet potato slips, to develop when we start the systems. That was after one video I made about how to propagate sweet potato slips, which got lots of hits. And then last year I did a whole series on growing the sweet potatoes in some of those seed flats that we start. And I'm doing that again, and in this case in a room that's 52 to 54 degrees Fahrenheit, and in the soilless mixture that has high moisture content on a heat mat. It's taken 30 days for them to start shooting up some of the slips. So, and over the next month there'll be more, and some of the sweet potatoes won't do as well. So if there's disease in them that's difficult to see, or if they've used, if there's been pesticides that have been used on them, then they may not shoot up the slips. The warmer it is, the quicker they're going to shoot up the slips, and the quicker they're going to throw out roots as well. James Steffens had commented before about dealing with quackgrass. I talked about solarization, occultation to kill the quackgrass or digging them up. I talked about flame weeding, and I responded to one of his questions and with using a torch and all. And he's got about 60 fruit trees where the quackgrass, I guess, is growing right up around them. And talked about he was going to remove some of the wood chips and burn the quackgrass. I think it's a possibility that it may work, James. I'm just not confident that it will, because as you burn the top of them, there's still the resources down in the rhizome and in the root layer, and they're going to send up some more shoots. You'd have to repeatedly go out there and reburn them. And for 60 fruit trees, it might be a bit labor intensive. Is it possible? Absolutely, it may work. Let us know if it does work ultimately. So I think I'm trying to race through this. I think I'm going to end this video at this point. I got through most of the questions there and all. If you have any more comments or questions, I'm sorry I'm giving superficial answers to some of these comments and questions. Sometimes I think I'd rather do a live stream so that the thing can just keep going and I can babble on about various topics and all. But if you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up. Share it with your friends if you think it's of value. And by all means, folks, take care, stay safe, grow more food. Be more food resilient and food sustainable. Thanks, folks. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.